The night my sister threw a glass of wine at my face in front of 200 people, my mother dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin and looked away. That's where this story starts. Not at the beginning, because if I started at the beginning, I'd have to explain 31 years of being the wrong daughter. And I don't have that kind of time. What I have is this: a split lip, a ruined dress, and a secret my sister had been hiding for 4 years that was about to burn her entire life to the ground. My name is Claire. I'm a licensed physical therapist. I have a caseload of 43 patients, a studio apartment I'm proud of, and a mother who has never once, in my 31 years of living, introduced me first. My sister's name is Daniela. She is 3 years older than me, 2 inches taller, and has been the sun in our family's solar system since the day she was born. I'm not bitter about it, or at least, I stopped being bitter around the time I realized that bitterness was just another way of giving her power she hadn't earned. My mother called Daniela her bright one, her firecracker, her gift. She called me responsible, which, in our house, was just a polite word for invisible. Daniela became an interior designer. And this matters, she told everyone she was an interior designer. She had a website, business cards with a logo she'd spent more money on than I spent on groceries in a month. She went to networking events and charity galas and came home with clients' names written on cocktail napkins. She talked about her work constantly: the Hendersons' kitchen renovation, the Marchetti family's lake house, the boutique hotel in Savannah she was allegedly redesigning from the ground floor up. What she never talked about was her license, because she didn't have one. I didn't know that yet, that night at the Whitmore Foundation gala. I didn't know a lot of things. What I knew was this: my friend Dr. Reyes had gotten me a +1 invitation to one of the most prestigious fundraising events in our city, a black-tie dinner at the Callaway Grand Hotel ballroom that seated 240 guests and raised money every year for pediatric rehabilitation, the exact field I worked in. I had worn a navy dress I'd been saving for something important. I had done my hair. I had been genuinely, quietly happy to be there. Daniela had not been invited. She had found out through our mother, who I'd mentioned it to in passing, and she had somehow, in the way that Daniela always somehow managed things, gotten herself added to the guest list through a client connection. I didn't know she was there until I heard her voice behind me, warm and loud, and already performing for whoever was standing nearby. "Claire, oh my God, you actually came." Like it was my presence that was surprising. Like she hadn't inserted herself into an event that had nothing to do with her. I turned around. She was in red. Of course she was. I smiled. I said hello. I introduced her to Dr. Reyes. I did everything a reasonable person does when they're trying to have a normal evening and their sister materializes out of nowhere like a weather event. For about 40 minutes, it was fine. Then the keynote speaker mentioned grant allocations for new rehabilitation clinics and mentioned specifically the licensure requirements for practice directors, and something shifted in Daniela's face. A tightening. Something behind her eyes going very still. I didn't notice it at the time. I was listening to the speaker. Later I would understand exactly what she'd been thinking in that moment. What I noticed was that 20 minutes after the speech, when I was standing near the bar talking to a hospital administrator named Gerald, who was interested in partnering with my clinic's pediatric program, Daniela appeared at my elbow. She interrupted. She pivoted the conversation entirely toward herself, her portfolio, her upcoming hotel project, her vision for healthcare-adjacent spaces. Gerald, being polite, engaged with her. I stepped back. I told myself it was fine. I had been telling myself that my whole life. It was when Gerald mentioned that his hospital's new wing was still looking for a licensed design consultant, a contracted, credentialed position with a significant fee, that things unraveled. Daniela said, without blinking, "I'm actually licensed in 3 states. I'd love to send over my credentials." Gerald looked pleased. He handed her his card. And then he turned to me and said something kind, something about the pediatric program, and I must have looked distracted, because Daniela right then, right there said, "Oh, Claire's just the therapist. She doesn't do the business side." Just the therapist. I looked at her. She smiled at me. That particular smile she had, the one that looked warm from the outside, that looked like affection but functioned like a hand pressing down on the top of your head, keeping you below the surface. I excused myself. I walked toward the far end of the ballroom. I needed 30 seconds to breathe and remind myself that I was an adult at a professional event and that making a scene was not something I was willing to do. I was standing near the window with a glass of water when she found me again. "You looked upset," she said. "I'm fine. You always do that. You make a face and then you say you're fine." "Daniela, I'm fine. You're jealous." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was reading the weather. "You've always had a hard time when I'm successful." I put my glass down. I said, very quietly, "You told him you're licensed in 3 states. "I am. Are you?" Something shifted, just for a fraction of a second, then the smile came back. "I don't know what you think you're implying, but this isn't the place." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question." "Claire." Her voice dropped. "Don't embarrass yourself tonight. I'm asking if you have a valid interior design license, Daniela. Because that man just offered you a contracted position at a hospital based on credentials you claim to have." She picked up a glass from a passing tray. She looked at me over the rim of it. And then she said, "You have always needed to be better than me at something. And the fact that you're not that kills you, doesn't it?" That's when the wine hit my face. I want to be clear about the sequence of events, because people who weren't there have filled in the details incorrectly. She did not throw the glass in a moment of rage. She did not lose control. She tilted the glass deliberately, with complete composure, and poured it directly into my face. Then she set the glass down. Then she reached out, grabbed my arm just above the elbow, and walked me firmly, quietly, with a grip that would leave bruises, I photographed the next morning toward the side exit, murmuring to anyone who glanced over that her sister wasn't feeling well. Nobody stopped her. My mother, who I spotted near the entrance to the dining room, saw the whole thing. She turned back to her conversation. I found myself outside in a service corridor, my dress soaked, my arm aching, my face burning, not from the wine. From the understanding, fully formed and undeniable, that I had been managed. Again, that my entire family had a system for managing me, and the system worked because I had always, eventually, let it. I stood in that corridor for 4 minutes. Then I went to the restroom, blotted my dress with paper towels, looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, and made a decision. I drove home alone. I did not call my mother. I did not text Daniela. I changed out of my dress, made tea, and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop. I had been doing physical therapy for 7 years. I had worked in 2 states before settling here. I knew what a license looked like. I knew how to use a verification database. It took me less than 15 minutes. Daniela's name did not appear in any state licensing board registry. Not here. Not in the 2 other states she'd mentioned to Gerald. Not anywhere. She wasn't licensed. She had never been licensed. I sat back in my chair. 4 years. She had been running a design business for 4 years. She had billed clients, real clients, clients who had paid real money for professional services she was not legally qualified to provide. She had signed contracts. She had represented herself as a credentialed professional to a hospital administrator less than 3 hours ago, in front of witnesses, for a position that would have placed her inside a medical facility. In my state, practicing interior design on commercial and healthcare-adjacent properties without a license isn't just a civil matter. It's fraud. I closed my laptop. I did not sleep. The next morning, I called my friend Priya, who was a contract attorney. Not to ask her to do anything, just to understand what I was looking at. She was quiet for a moment after I explained. Then she said, "Claire, if she's been billing commercial clients and signing off on projects that required licensure, and she's been telling people she's credentialed, that's not a technicality. That's a pattern." "I know. And the hospital thing, that's a separate exposure. Because healthcare facilities have their own regulatory layer." "I know." There was a pause. "What do you want to do?" Priya asked. That was the question, wasn't it? I thought about my mother turning away. I thought about just the therapist. I thought about 31 years of being pressed down below the surface, quietly and consistently, and always with that smile. "I want to know what the right thing to do is," I said. "I can't tell you that." "I know, but tell me what the options are." Priya walked me through it. I could do nothing. I could confront Daniela privately and give her the chance to come clean on her own. I could file a complaint with the state licensing board, which would trigger a mandatory investigation. Or, and this was the one that made my hands cold, I could contact Gerald directly, given that a fraud had been committed against him specifically, and let him decide how to proceed. "If you contact the board," Priya said, "you lose control of the timeline. They move at their own speed." "And if I contact Gerald?" "He has lawyers." and he has an obligation to his hospital to report potential fraud involving a vendor interaction. I thanked Priya and sat with it for 2 more days. I want you to know that. I didn't act immediately. I thought about what I was doing and why I was doing it, and I made sure the reason wasn't anger, because anger is a bad compass. The reason was this. Somewhere in our city, there were clients, homeowners, possibly business owners, who had paid my sister for licensed professional services and received something fraudulent. There was a hospital administrator who was about to offer a contracted position inside a medical facility to someone who had lied to his face. And there was my sister, who had been doing this for 4 years and had no apparent intention of stopping. On the 3rd day, I emailed Gerald. I kept it factual. I told him I wanted to flag something before he moved forward with Daniela, that I had reason to believe her licensure claims required verification and that I was available if he needed to speak with me. I included a screenshot of the licensing board database search showing no results for her name. He responded within 2 hours. Miss Claire, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I've forwarded your email to our legal team. I appreciate your integrity. 4 days later, Daniela called me. The number flashed on my screen and I stood there looking at it for a long moment. Then I answered. What did you do? It wasn't a question. I said, I told the truth. Do you have any idea what you've done? Gerald pulled the offer. He said the hospital is reviewing the interaction. Reviewing the interaction, Claire. That means lawyers. That means, Daniela, you are my sister. You poured wine in my face in front of 200 people and dragged me out by my arm. Silence. You have been representing yourself as a licensed professional for 4 years, I said. You have taken money from clients who believed you were credentialed. I did not make you do that. I did not make you walk up to a hospital administrator and tell him you were licensed in 3 states. I did not make you do any of it. I know what Mom is going to do. I was right. My mother called 20 minutes later. Her voice was measured and cold in a way that was somehow worse than shouting. She told me I had humiliated the family, that I had betrayed my sister over a technicality, that I was jealous and vindictive, and that she had never expected this from me. I let her finish. Then I said, what Daniela did is not a technicality, and what she did to me at the gala wasn't a technicality either. I photographed the bruises on my arm. I have the name of 3 witnesses. I am asking you, once, to please not call me again until you're ready to have a different kind of conversation. I hung up. What followed was not fast. I want to say that clearly because if you're watching this expecting a tidy 30-day resolution, this is not that story. Real consequences take time. The licensing board opened a formal investigation 6 weeks after I filed a complaint, which I did file, separately from whatever Gerald's lawyers were doing. Priya helped me submit it correctly. During those 6 weeks, my mother called me 4 times. I answered twice. Both conversations were variations of the same argument. I was wrong, I was jealous, I had destroyed something that could have been kept quiet. During one of those calls, she said something that I have thought about many times since. She said, you could have just let it go. You've always been the strong one. You didn't need to do this. The strong one. That's what I was. Not the bright one, not the firecracker, not the gift, the strong one. Which meant, the one who absorbs, the one who lets it go, the one who can take it, so she should. I told my mother I loved her. Then I told her that being strong wasn't the same as being a surface for other people's choices to land on. And then I said goodbye. The licensing board investigation concluded 14 weeks after I filed. Daniela was found to have operated without a license on 11 documented commercial projects over 4 years. 3 of those projects involved healthcare-adjacent properties, which triggered an additional regulatory review. She was issued a cease and desist, a financial penalty, and a formal bar from applying for licensure in this state for 3 years. 2 of her former clients filed civil suits for refund of fees paid under false pretenses. Gerald's hospital referred the matter to their legal counsel. I don't know the full details of what happened there. That was between Daniela and their lawyers. What I know is that the contracted position was never offered. My mother did not speak to me for 2 months. When she finally called again, she didn't apologize exactly. She said she'd been thinking, and that she could see the situation had been more complicated than she'd understood. It wasn't the conversation I would have written for us, but it was the first honest thing she'd said to me in years, and I decided to meet her there. Daniela and I have not spoken since the phone call. I don't know what her life looks like now. I know she had to dissolve her business. I know she moved. I know that two of the people she had called her closest friends quietly distanced themselves when the story became known in certain professional circles, because that is the thing about building a life on credentials you don't have when it comes apart. It comes apart completely. There's no partial collapse. What I know about my own life is this. I still get up at 6:30. I still see my patients. I am still, by my mother's original definition, the responsible one. But I've spent some time re-examining what that word means, because I think she always used it to mean manageable. And I'm not that anymore. I am a licensed physical therapist. I worked for my credentials. I have documentation of every hour of my clinical training, every examination I sat, every board review I completed. I did not shortcut a single step. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. There's a patient I see on Thursday morning. She's 9 years old and she is relearning how to walk after a spinal injury. She's at the stage where she's frustrated, where the progress feels too slow and the effort feels too large, and sometimes she looks at me with this expression that I recognize from somewhere deep in myself, that look that says, "Why is this so hard when it looks so easy for everyone else?" And I tell her the same thing every week. I say, the work that's invisible is still real. The hours that nobody watched you put in still count. The progress that doesn't look like progress yet is still moving forward. I tell her that, and I mean it for both of us. I don't know if I'll ever have the family I thought I had. I'm learning to stop measuring my life against the one I was supposed to have and start paying attention to the one I actually do. There's a difference. It took me a long time to see it. What I know is that I walked out of the Callaway Grand Hotel with wine on my dress and bruises forming on my arm, and I did not collapse, and I did not disappear, and I did not let it go in the way my mother meant when she told me I should. I let it go the other way, the way that meant, this ends here, not the family, not the love, but the version of me that absorbs everything and says nothing and calls it strength. That version is gone. I'm still here.